I'm Domenica from Sunday Slay's Cosplay, and this video is Red Sonja's costume build. This version of Red Sonja is from a figurine from Sideshow Collectibles that I saw and just fell in love with and had to make a version for my own. So, let's get to making. So if you don't have a brown bikini, you can paint one by using acrylic paint and fabric medium. This is GAC 900, and when you mix it with acrylic paint and then heat it up, it turns it into fabric paint. I used a heat gun on it and then threw it in the dryer for a half hour. The sides look a lot like leather. For the scale mail, I found a lifesaver. This guy Ben Eady on YouTube is awesome, and he created a bunch of videos about interlinkable scale and chainmail. It's made up of two different lines of mail that interlock with the one above it. In his videos, he has the links to the Thingiverse files. If you use this tutorial to create your own or use my Cricut files, please give him a tip. His design saved me a ton of time. From his files, I made a Cricut file, which is up on my design space, and I used the Stronghold mat with 9x12 sheets of 2mm EVA foam. To cut through the foam, I used the knife blade on the balsa wood setting and then stop the cut after the first pass. If you heat it with the heat gun, it stops trying to curl. The result is this awesome, super easy, lightweight scale mail. Unfortunately, the interlocked lines wouldn't sit on the bikini cup nice enough, so here I'm cutting them into individual scales and gluing them with super glue. This took forever, but I still saved a ton of time with the Cricut cuts. I was able to use the interlocking lines for the bikini bottom. I'm just trimming the edges of the lines here to make a nice V shape. For the pauldron, I'm starting out here just drawing the pattern. After I cut it out, I realized I made this drawing way too big and my shape was a bit too bulbous. So I made two others in a medium and a small version. I'm not sure which is going to fit me the best, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut them both out of 6mm foam. This pattern mirrors at the middle, so I'm cutting two of each one and using barge cement to glue them down the center. So I happened to luck out here, and the smaller one was perfect for the second layer of the pauldron, and when I cut the end off of it so it better fit, little end was perfect for the third tier that just has a little tiny bit poking out. I then scanned in my patterns, and I'm using Adobe Illustrator to trace the detail layer from my first sketch. Since I changed my pattern after that first sketch, here I'm making that first sketch fit into that second pattern. I put the resulting PDF in Cricut Design Space and cut them out using the same settings as earlier on 2mm foam. I use the same pattern, scan, trace, and cut technique for all other pieces of my armor. These are the knee parts. I glued all of the details with super glue. After the detail layer is glued on, I heat shape them with my heat gun, and this also seals the foam. The result here is a pretty colorful set of greaves. The Gorget was a difficult piece to pattern. I used plastic to duct tape and create it on my own body. Here, I'm cutting many small pieces to get the pattern to even lay flat. I cut them out of 6mm foam and glued them together with barge, and after they were glued together, I laid it flat to create a paper pattern for my detail piece. The gauntlet is easiest to pattern. I'm using paper and just drawing it onto my forearm. For the sake of time and comfort, I am deciding against a full gauntlet and I'm doing without the fingers. So I'll just have a forearm and a handpiece. I'm going to dremel this down a little bit because it's a little thick. Dremel it down. So I drummered this down just a little bit to hopefully curve over my knuckles. It was a little bit thick, and I think this looks just a titch better. So I'm taking all of the metal parts of Red Sonja and I am priming them with Plasti Dip, the regular old Plasti Dip in black, and then I'm covering them with a dark steel metallic. And I'm just giving them a couple of coats of this metallic, and that's my base color for all of my metal pieces. It looks pretty shiny. Here I'm dremeling down some edges that aren't lying flush with each other. Here I am shading the parts by dry brushing black into all the crevices. It adds contrast to the armor and looks really nice. I've since used an airbrush on my armor builds, which shortens this process considerably. But for this build, I dry brushed every single nook and cranny. For highlights, I'm using a much larger brush and just brushing on the edges. For Red Sonja's single sleeve, I went online and got a free pattern for a jacket. It's by Patterns by Mood. It's called the Hawthorne jacket. I chose this one because it had a lot of sweeping layers all the way down, and I only needed part of it for her sleeve because it's just this shoulder here and then the sleeve. So I'm going to make this out of muslin first. I have my muslin here, and once it's fitted, I'll make it out of my actual fabric. So it's just 3 total pieces. This is the back, this is the front, and this is the sleeve. I'm gonna add a collar as well. I've taken my muslin pattern, sewed it together, fitted it to myself, and then tore it apart. And so now I have the new pattern. This is the back shoulder. It's very messy. So I'm using my muslin as my pattern. And I'm gonna cut this out of this fabric here that's not quite leather, but looks leathery enough. And sew that together. I'm not doing a lining because it's not going to show, so see how it turns out. As with anything asymmetrical, when you're doing one sleeve or one pauldron, make sure your fabric is correct and your patterns are great, that it'll go on the right arm that you would like it to be on, because I've done that before and it's awful when you have to redo things again. I've stitched the top shoulder. This was my first stitch here, and then I attached the arm while it was on flat. So this is kind of what it looks like now, and I'm about to sew together the sleeve. So this is the jacket without any buckles or anything on it, so I need to hem the bottom. and I installed a snap right here for around the neck. Right now I'm making straps for each of my armor pieces, and I'm using just a leather strap that I got on Amazon, and I'm putting these snaps in. So each side will just snap like that, and then each end is going to be hot glued into the armor piece. Using a leather hole puncher to punch holes in each of these so the snaps will set in them. Like so. The bad thing about this way of attaching is they aren't adjustable at all, so just be sure to get the measures right. So I'm attaching this with what I actually cut off of the cuff here of the same fabric, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and it'll cover up my glove that is a different leather color. For the Greaves, I have to point out that the pleather has a rough side and a plasticky smooth side. I'm using the hot glue on the more rough side so it'll actually hold. So this attaches and pulls here to give it some give. So the knee pieces are permanently attached and bend like this. To attach the pauldrons together, I'm just using some hot glue. I'm just hot gluing the gem onto the Gorget. I don't have video of casting these gems. They were made in a silicone mold with 2-part epoxy resin and colored with resin powder. My friend Armored Heart Cosplay was nice enough to cast them for me since she already had the mold and the powder. She's a great cosplayer and you should check her out on Instagram. To close the Gorget, I made an overlapping piece, backed it with a small piece of thermoplastic to give it some rigidity, and I'm using sticky Velcro to clasp it. And it looks like this. I used some leftover brown suede-ish fabric that I had for backing the bikini bottom. Using leather string, I sewed the loops of the scale mail on. At the top it's folded over, and I sewed the leather string in there so it could be fished through and tied around the waist. I'm cutting the sides to fit the triangle. I didn't throw away those scraps. I'm sewing them onto the back to make layers that give the shape a little bit more interest. The shape of my scale mail is a little wide at the top, so I'm cutting off a few scales to give it more vertical lines up my body rather than a wider triangle. So I have pretty much everything here. I made this swoop a little bit too low here, so I have pins in it. I just gotta re-sew that. And my strap broke. I'm gonna fix that. There's supposed to be a strap that goes across her chest. That is supposed to be her strap for her sword scabbard. Whoop, that's not attached yet. But I think I'm gonna do without it because I think I'm just gonna get cluttered and be uncomfortable, and I don't need a place to put my sword. It's fine, I'll just carry it. To weather the jacket and make it look like it isn't brand new, I'm brushing on cream contour makeup to the places where it naturally creases. You can see there on the top I sewed in a strip of Velcro that mirrors a strip that was stuck onto the underside of my pauldron, and that's how the pauldron attaches. Now this makeup is washable, so if I threw it into a washing machine, it would come out and I'd have to redo it. But this was an easier option for me than acrylic paint, which tends to get a little crusty on fabric. When you cut fur, you can't use scissors. You have to cut it from the back one bit at a time to be sure you don't cut the fur at the ends and it makes it look really stubby. I'm just using an X-Acto to do this, and you just go real slow just through that back side of the fabric. This is just a cheap belt I bought, and I'm cutting holes in the fur for the belt to go through. I added some stitches on top and bottom for each hole so it doesn't tear any further. This is a small dart to make the top fit around the curve of my back. After you sew fur, you need to pull out the hairs out of the stitch, and the stitch becomes pretty much invisible. I did a little garter here. The bottoms are safety pinned. I just hide them, but it's riveted on, and this loops over my belt and is adjustable so I can tighten it. For the leg and arm wraps, I'm simulating leather out of 2mm foam and using googly eyes as rivets. I'm hole punching all around the edges to stitch my leather string. My heat gun seals it, and I'm using Flex Bond to prime it. These are googly eyes spray painted bronze. It attaches with a loop of the leather string. To paint it, I'm dry brushing acrylic on, and it looks pretty leathery. Back to gems, these are the teardrop dangling ones that hang off of the bikini. I'm backing them with foam clay. These are then primed and painted in hammered gold. I'm also painting my googly eyes that you saw earlier. To attach, I'm making little loops out of my leather string. These just tie on the back so they're adjustable. I'm making them very loose at first to adjust once I put them on. Once they're in place, a little hot glue will hold the gems in the right spot. And that's it! That's Red Sonja's costume build. If I were to do anything a little differently, I would make the straps of my greaves a little longer. I only had enough leather to attach just the very ends here, and I had a few failures, so if I were to do it again, I would wrap the leather all the way around and glue all the way around. The very tip of my axe kept breaking off. That's a separate video, but I had a few failures there. Just glued that back on. All in all, it held up pretty well for it being mostly made out of foam and me running around in a wooded area. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram, Sunday Slays Cosplay. So let's see what it finally looks like all together.